You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Lot to get to this evening. Primarily, though, I have good news for you. That is, though there is a lot of really loud, angry yelling online about a Supreme Court decision 7-2 in which SCOTUS ruled something totally different than is being yelled about by a lot of people. The good news is that even that particular ruling isn't what's the most important thing going on right now. So, the Supreme Court ruled in a 7-2 decision, in which case I believe Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberals, supposedly blocking President Trump from deporting Venezuelans under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. And everyone's like, unreal, terrible. The Supreme Court's not, they're not allowing the country to be kept safe. It's unconstitutional. It's terrible. Yeah, that's not what happened. That ain't what happened. What occurred? The Supreme Court did not say that the President of the United States can't deport alien enemies, otherwise known as members of Tren de Aragua, MS-13, the Sinaloa cartel, individuals who are here in the country illegally and are also part of criminal organizations or invading forces. The Supreme Court did not rule that deporting those individuals is unconstitutional. That's not what happened. In the actual case, SCOTUS just sent that case back down to the lower court, the Fifth, with instructions to decide whether the president's order is unconstitutional and to discern how much notice alien enemies must be given. By the way, which means, hey, in a half an hour, we're going to be deporting you. That's what notice can mean. Notice, there's no special standard of notice, just like there's no magical special standard of due process like a Latin word or some nonsense here. So, the argument that some have made that, oh, this is the Supreme Court ruling that Trump can't deport foreign enemies. No, that's not what was ruled. Now, is that what I wanted the Supreme Court to rule in this case? No, I agree with Clarence Thomas, as well as Justice Samuel Alito, who, by the way, wrote a scathing dissent we're going to get to in just a second. Alito's been doing a lot of that lately. The Supreme Court of the United States should have ruled that the president is more than allowed. Again, it's not even a case of allowance. It is, in fact, under his Article 2 authority to get rid of foreign enemies in the United States. I wish they would have ruled that way universally, but that's not what occurred. They did kick it back down to the courts. Here's the thing. That's kind of the habit of the courts right now. The courts are essentially doing two things. Number one, they are trying to clear up any small areas of this horrible, massive storm front of gray area that's been coming for a very long time. And number two, they're trying to kick things that might have an implication on future decisions that they're not quite ready to rule on yet because it's a small facet of one particular lawsuit. They're kicking those things down to the lower courts so that by the time they get ready to issue big slamma-mamma-jamma ultimate decisions, they don't have, 2 weeks ago, you actually said this one thing, and now it's kind of sort of in conflict with this other thing, so that's a huge problem. That's why they kick things down. By the way, the Supreme Court's been booting things down to lower courts so they could wait to rule on things. They did this during the Chevron case in regard to regulation for like 4 preceding cases 2 or 3 years prior. That is, unfortunately, though, one of the things that the Supreme Court has taken a habit of doing since John Roberts has been the Chief Justice. Now, Samuel Alito did clap back and said, and this is a quote relayed by Benjamin Weingarten of the Federalist, "The district court has had time to conduct the rigorous analysis that our precedents required and has concluded that class certification would be improper here. This development makes the relief issued by the court today all the more extraordinary. Purporting to exercise its appellate jurisdiction, the court issues preliminary relief to a punitive class that the district court has explicitly refused to certify." In this case, what Alito has suggested is the Supreme Court needs to be really, really careful by suggesting that a court can grant relief to a group of people that hasn't even been clarified and described yet. You actually have to outline what a group is before you define relief for it. Otherwise, you get way more gray area. Now, this brings us over to a very, very crucial thing the Supreme Court is dealing with that I'm not really seeing anybody talk about. A few people have gotten kind of close to it. Ben Shapiro got a little bit close to it. Jesse Kelly got a little bit close to it. But I haven't really seen anyone outline the biggest argument right now as to the most important thing going on in the Supreme Court. It is getting ready to change everything in the United States like nobody's talking about it. And it's not birthright citizenship. It's kind of a fun sidecar of the birthright citizenship issue. This all has to do with nationwide injunctions. That right now, any federal district court judge, whether you're from New Hampshire, Washington, D.C., Arkansas, Connecticut, Oregon, doesn't matter. You can throw out a nationwide injunction because you are a, far to the left or on the right style activist, whatever that is. And then you can stop the entire federal government, the executive branch, the legislative branch from doing something because you as a district court judge have decided that you don't like it. So you're going to issue a stay, a freeze, an injunction, whatever. Right now, the Supreme Court is not really arguing the merits of the birthright citizenship question. And you're not even really seeing the Solicitor General of the United States really plant both feet in the ground to argue that. Instead, what the Supreme Court is debating, and you've seen Amy Coney Barrett trying to debate this, you've seen Ketanji Brown Jackson taking the far left-leaning position, which is that judges should be able to throw out injunctions like Oprah with free cars, or you have Clarence Thomas, who basically dropped in like the Kool-Aid man and stopped things very, very, very quickly, suggesting that the United States needs to stop this practice immediately. By the way, here is Justice Clarence Thomas making this point.
General, when were the first universal injunctions used?
We believe that the best reading of that is what you said in Trump against Hawaii, which is that Wirtz in 1963 was really the first universal injunction.
Now, that is a crucial set of sentences that I've already seen people gloss over. So, Sauer, the Solicitor General, answers the question presented by Clarence Thomas, when did these nationwide injunctions become a thing? And the Solicitor General says, well, Clarence Thomas, as you stated in U.S. versus Hawaii, that was in the 60s. And then they proceed through, and I'm not going to drag you through all of this because time is short. Clarence Thomas proceeds to illustrate with the Solicitor General that it wasn't really until 2007 with these environmental lawsuits, because George Bush was the big bad guy of the day who wanted to spread oil all over the innocent woodland creatures. Oh no! Nonsense. That was when those injunctions started ramping up. And then in the second Obama term, Republicans came through and a lot of right-wing justices started coming through to stop the Obama administration. And then left-wing justices during the first Trump administration, and then right-wing judges during the Biden administration, and now more left-wing judges during the Trump. It has to stop. And so what you are seeing is the Supreme Court setting up a situation. And by the way, I do want to make this clear. Even if Amy Coney Barrett ends up siding with the the liberals in the Supreme Court. Sorry, I know I'm being redundant. I think you're going to see Justice John Roberts, who is growing increasingly tired of this. Something the left does not know how to do is keep from pissing off the moderates. They don't understand it. So we'll come back to this a little bit later. We got to talk about the big, beautiful bill that did, in fact, fail in committee today due to 5 votes from Chip Roy of Texas, Josh Brashear of Oklahoma, Andrew Clyde, Ralph Norman, and Lloyd Smucker. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, we're going to cut over to our White House correspondent. She's going to give us a couple of updates on this. Elizabeth Mitchell, Daily Signal White House correspondent. How are things in the swamp today?
Things are good. It's great to be back.
So let's dig right into it. You had an exclusive, nice scoop dropping on a couple of things to be happy about financially regarding the Republican House right now. Those aren't always a common thing. So tell us what you got.
So if it's not enough motivation for Republicans to cut federal funding for child gender transitions, just that it would protect kids from these types of procedures, which we know have long-term harmful consequences. I learned yesterday that cutting Medicaid funding, child insurance program funding, SNAP funding, et cetera, all these federal funding programs for child gender transitions would save the taxpayers over the next decade $1.4 billion. This is a very significant amount here.
That is a very, very significant amount. It looks like there's a lot of these spending projects, like things through Planned Parenthood, certain projects that have been stapled on by previous left-wing administrations, that simply not participating in these programs over the next decade is going to save Americans tens of billions just in these minor secondary and tertiary programs.
Absolutely. It really doesn't make sense for taxpayers to be funding gender transitions and abortions, these things that are, one, against lots of people's religions, and two, are harming a young person.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the Trump administration and what it's doing for young people. I know that Trump is fighting for a couple of other things in this particular reconciliation package. One of these things is, of course, Ted Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz has talked about the idea of beginning to replace Social Security, not cutting people off of what they've paid into, but beginning to phase in this $1,000 per child in the United States that would then go towards the S&P 500, and it would grow over their lifetime. So kind of bringing in a substitution on deck for Social Security. What kind of feeling are you getting about that at the White House and the Hill?
I think that seems like a really interesting idea. Something we can be looking out for in budget reconciliation is ways that Republicans are using the reconciliation bill to codify President Trump's executive orders. With the slim majorities in the House and the Senate and the number of votes needed to pass a bill, it's going to be pretty difficult to get legislation through which codifies executive orders, particularly more conservative ones that no Democrats are going to vote for. And so reconciliation is potentially the only chance to get that agenda through Congress. And so being able to see potentially defunding Planned Parenthood through the budget, getting a program like this program you just mentioned with Ted Cruz through. Also, as we were just talking about, cutting funding for gender transitions, which codifies a really early on EO. All of these things are great ways for House Republicans to put President Trump's agenda into law for permanently.
It does really feel like there's a wide open field for Republicans in the House and the Senate right now. But of course, there's a lot of angst because some of the codifying of various bills and executive orders are easier said than done, which, I mean, is better than things were in Biden's administration, because then it was, easier dead than son. But anywho, I digress. When we're looking at this particular series of measures to be codified, some things you can't just stuff into the big, beautiful bill. They actually need to meet that 60-vote threshold over in the Senate. Is this actually getting through to Congress? Because I don't think it's really getting through to the public.
Yeah, I think something to note here is that there's something in the Senate called the Byrd Rule, where if there are extraneous provisions that the person in charge of rules thinks do not make sense, they're off topic, they're not relevant, they can strike that provision out of the budget. So that could definitely be an issue for some of these tack-ins that are going into the budget. That could even include what we just talked about with transitions. It could really include any of the things that we've been talking about today, that they could possibly be struck if they're deemed off topic.
In the Senate, this particular individual is the parliamentarian. That's Elizabeth McDonough. She's not exactly friendly, one would say, towards various individuals in the Trump administration. Looking forward to the next couple of weeks here, do you think that we're going to see Republicans actually get behind this, or we're going to be stuck in kind of the mire and the mud of kind of endless bureaucracy? How tough of a fight does Johnson actually have here?
It's a tough fight. Of course, there's that classic division between establishment Republicans and the fiscal hawks and the Freedom Caucus, those types of people who really just want to use this as an opportunity to cut as much as possible. They don't want cuts in name only. They want real cuts that are going to actually leave a dent in the national debt, which we know is a huge crisis. But President Trump is urging every House, every Senate Republican to get the bill, get their markups of the bill through as quickly as possible so that we can move on with this. I believe the goal is to have reconciliation done by July 4th, if not, or Memorial Day, one of the two. So that deadline is quickly approaching, and we know that the White House is making calls to Republicans saying, you need to support the bill. We don't want to drag this out any longer than we have to.
That's well said. Elizabeth Mitchell, Daily Signal's White House correspondent. Thanks for giving us a bit of a perspective here.
Thanks, Tony.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Get it? Because of the, because of the Comey with the 86, 40, 47 stuff. We're going to talk about that, but I do want to touch up on one thing because we did have a mail time question that I think kind of fits to actually discuss now, which would be from Fenner 27. Tony, what are your thoughts on the big, beautiful bill? I've heard items in it that sound good but aren't. Okay. I have two massive takeaways from the big, beautiful bill. Number one, it's not over. There's this argument that, it was killed today in committee. That's the end of it. No, it's not. Nope. Speaker Johnson is used to working under these particular small margins. This is, by the way, what happens when you have a small margin of error. So the Republicans that ran Goofy Goober, the candidate, instead of competent Republicans, both on the establishment side, on the populist side, on the traditional conservative side. This is why good candidates matter, because these tiny, minuscule leads aren't going to cut it. But Johnson has gotten it through before, and I think they'll end up getting it through again, because when DOJ finally comes in again, and they will, and they basically point the magnifying glass at the few representatives who are holding things up, they're eventually going to clean things up and get things through. Now, there are a few things that I am happy are in the particular package. The no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. That's good. Trump did promise no tax on Social Security. I think that should stay. That's not in this particular package. There's just a $4,000 deduction. And then no tax on auto loan interest, which, is fine. There's a lot of stuff that should be cut. I don't know if enough can be cut of it that a lot of people are really looking for. A lot of people want this bill to do everything, and that's just not how bills work. If the Senate parliamentarian smells half of this stuff, she'll just scoop it out and say, sorry, sucks to suck. That said, the biggest thing that is in this bill that is phenomenal that needs to be passed, and I mentioned this to Elizabeth, Senator Ted Cruz, $1,000 to every American when they're born, that is then shoved into the S&P 500. That's fantastic, because that's what's going to replace Social Security. This means that we can actually finally start phasing out Social Security so that the people who paid into it, like a lot of elder members of our audience, they can get paid what they paid into it. And then people like me who've only paid in some, I only get some. And then the people now who are being born aren't going to be crushed by what will in fact be insolvent by 2035, no matter what we do. So this starts to finally move things forward without screwing over older Americans. That's what's crucial about this. So moving on, let's talk about Trump and Comey, otherwise known as the bumper track into this. Jenny got your number. So James Comey, who after he was ousted as the super duper important, amazing FBI director that was obsessed with Trump, Russia, and the urine from Russian prostitutes, apparently, James Comey has been walking around taking pictures of himself in forests and on long walks, talking about writing and the journey of life. Basically, he's a girl going through her photography phase in high school. That's James Comey. And he released an Instagram post that was largely regarded as a pretty bad move, in which he posted a picture of some seashells, and they spell 86 and then like a small space and then 47. And then he posted cool shell format on my like on my beach walk, or cool shell formation, on my beach walk. And then everyone lost their minds. And the reason that everyone lost their minds is because the term 86 has a couple of different meanings. Now, before everyone starts, chucking full wine glasses at their computer screens, I would like to point out that 86 does in fact have some American mob murder terminology with it, in which, there's a kind of an old truthism situation where, 8 miles out, 6 feet deep, or 8 feet wide, or 8 feet long, 6 feet deep, that kind of a graving situation. I've also heard 86 used in law enforcement, in the military, and in like cooking terminology as to cancel something, to get rid of it, and to throw it out. And again, as is in fact an example in, you know, none other than, believe it or not, SpongeBob SquarePants.
86 those patties, Krabs. We just got a call about 2 ghouls burying a stiff over by Shallow Grave Road.
Okay, so the thing that I'm hearing constantly is, you know, was that Comey calling for Trump's assassination? This is the Secret Service, because you're not allowed to make threats about the president. That is a thing. That's not a First Amendment thing. You're not allowed to make actual threats to the president. And if the Secret Service believes there's a possible threat, they'll pay you a visit, as they should. And it should be noted, they, you know, interviewed him. They ended up releasing him. A lot of people are saying, oh, this was, you know, an assassination announcement. That's the way that the president of the United States took it. This is what he's saying.
He knew exactly what that meant. A child knows what that meant. If you're the FBI director and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now,
should Comey have known that 86 could in fact be taken that way? Yes. Yes, he should have known that. That's not an uncommon interpretation of 86 something. It's not. Comey should have known. So either he's incredibly stupid. I really think that's it. He's a big freaking idiot. And here's my proof for Comey being a big freaking idiot. Here's assuming stupidity instead of malice right off the bat here. Because he then deleted the post after the outrage that came about 3.6 seconds after he posted this. And he posted, quote, "I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down." Oh, okay, a couple of things here. Number one, if you're going to make the case that you saw these shells on a beach walk, you're stupid. You're not a good liar. We know he takes this kind of photography all the time. We know that you as a grown man were walking around on the beach organizing these little shells together. So that would be number one. Number two, you don't just wander up. I've never walked on the beach anywhere, and I've walked on a fair number of beaches on the covers of romance novels, and I've never come across any magical shell formations. So how about no? Number two, you're not going to see some numbers on the beach and go, oh, I get 8647. Yeah. No. So absolutely not. Comey is an attention-seeking child, as he has been and as he will continue to be for a very long time. So what do I think of the Comey 8647 thing? I think he is an idiot who knew that would, in fact, cause an inflammatory response, and that he got what he wanted, which was he largely embarrassed the left in acting the way they are. By the way, from the side of the parties that suggests that making the OK symbol actually means white power, or suggests that Melania's jacket is a dog whistle for racism, or try that in a small town is actually a secret racist song. Man, all of a sudden when it comes to interpreting gang tattoos, or again, whether or not 8647 could be used in a violent manner or suggest violence, it's amazing how quickly that script flips. How about that? So we'll let the radio crew head over to commercial. I've got a few great reaction clips for you guys over here on the live stream, and the lights are flickering just a bit, so power may or may not stay on. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. All right, live stream crew. Again, if the lights go out, haven't been swatted, it's just wet here in Indiana. So that brings us over to Bernie Sanders. He's ready to give people what they want. They don't like all of the talking and the 86 and the 47. The socialists never been good with numbers. He's ready to talk a little bit about where the Democratic Party needs to go. Towards my pudding, with my lake houses and everything in AOC, with like Kamala Harris with the bigger butt. Here you go for Bernie Sanders.
Obviously, we have got to fight Trump every day because he is the most dangerous president, perhaps in American history. But we've got to do more than that. We have to have a vision, Stephen, of where we want this country to go. And we don't have that discussion. Why is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right?
Again, You just saying something is a human right does not, in fact, require other individuals to perform services for you. That's not a thing. Number two, the reason the United States doesn't have universal healthcare is because we're busy paying for the defense of the rest of the free world. And number three, and might I say, most importantly, that's not a vision. I love Democrats coming forward and suggesting, well, we got to have a vision for the whole country. Oh, look at all the everybody. And then they don't actually give you a vision. They say, we need a vision. And it's like, okay, well, what's your plan? Well, I could go back to my slogans on my signs. Are very important. So beautiful stuff. Thank you very much, Bernie. Harry Enton over at CNN has some unfortunate news for quite a few people. I love watching the polls come out. And the trend watchers, those who actually have pattern recognition as a basic skill, make things a little uncomfortable for those who are hoping for something different.
I think it's time for a bit of a reality check, right? We were going to late April. Donald Trump's approval rating, his net approval seemed to be falling. He seemed to be adios amigos. People were writing his political obituary. He is rising from the dead. Look at this. Hello, Trump's net approval rating among voters. This is the Reuters Ipsos polling. Look at this. In late April, he was 8 points underwater. But look at where he was in the most recent poll among voters. He's up 7 points to a -1 point net favorability rating. This is not the picture I think a lot of people were thinking that we would be painting.
So that is, in fact, correct. There was a window the Democrats had to attack Trump over mixing the economy with foreign policy. You're going to have instability. The stock market doesn't like that. American people get nervous. There was his time. And that window closed. Trump continued doing the things that he was doing, and as a pragmatist, and ended up correcting things and letting Scott Bessent run the show instead of Peter Navarro. Things are going back to basically where they were in the first Trump term, only a little bit better. That's where things are going to head, by the way, for those of you who are watching at home. So that brings us over to what is probably going to be our last clip. The left-leaning influencers who've decided to make videos whining about Republicans, just by the bucket load.
I think I kind of pity right-wingers because they're so fucking boring, Like, imagine not really having any curiosity about deeper and more expansive concepts. Everything's just like handed to them and they go, oh, okay, like my grandpappy didn't like black people, so I guess I don't either. Like, it's so boring. Like, no real exploration of what it means to be a person.
Yeah, good luck with this. Best of luck to you. We'll be back in a second for a bit of mail time before we head over with Spencer Klavan. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
A lot of great questions this week. A lot of them coming in this evening. We're going to hit these and then head over to Spencer Klavan for a topic on, I think is going to be pretty enjoyable. A little bit on the statue building nonsense and where we actually go. Because I don't know about you guys. I do happen to live in a small town where we do have a couple of really nice statues for people that actually did things and not just angry rage and skin color and gender being the qualifications. So we'll talk about that in just a minute here. First, a couple of questions from those in the comments and in our inboxes. First up, what do I make of Trump's Middle Eastern tour? Thanks, love the show. That's from John. I think that Trump's Middle Eastern tour was a pretty remarkable success. And the reason I think it was a remarkable success has very little to do with Israel or Hamas or the Houthis or the Saudis or Qatar or any of that. It has to do with China. And the best person to articulate this, I didn't find this clip until last night, and it is the best view of the situation. It comes from Shark Tank star Kevin O'Leary. Really good stuff. Check it out.
Really, what's going on with this trip are two things. One is China. He doesn't want China to develop a relationship in what I call the Middle East circle of friendship, and that is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And then you ask yourself, why are all these AI guys with him? What's with that? And I'll tell you what it's about. At the end of this week, he has a meeting in Abu Dhabi. And what's happened in the last 2 years, maybe it's taken 3, but U.S. is number 1 in AI development and spending. Number 2 is China. Number 3 now, and very advanced in certain verticals, is the United Arab Emirates. They are so far ahead in many different verticals. And he wants to see that cooperation on AI be removed from the China model, because remember there was talk about the UAE starting to talk to China about AI. He doesn't want any of that.
That's correct. That is correct. Boxing out China, ensuring that China is driven to the negotiation table continually, that is a serious, serious point of negotiation and trade policy that the Trump administration has done a pretty stellar job on. Again, however you like or despise the president of the United States, it is in fact good to broker deals with countries that are opposed to our adversaries. So the next question, and I do appreciate this, comes from a guy in the comments named Sal. Why is the United States the richest country in the world but unable to provide health care? Well, here's a very fine reason why. The United States does not, in fact, have a completely free market healthcare system. It does not have a completely regulated state-provided healthcare system. It has an extremely regulated pseudo-corporatist healthcare model, which means that certain companies in the United States are allowed to purchase licenses and have to jump through incredibly large hoops in order to provide healthcare products and services to the United States. The United States still has cancer services, second to none. Research and development practices, second to none. The United States has biotechnology that is second to none. And that is why the vast, vast, vast majority of the world does in fact come here for major operations. That's the truth. Now, small ER stuff is extremely expensive because of the insurance practices and regulation of the United States. That is what multiple studies outside of this country have found time and time again. The free healthcare that other countries provide is either extremely, extremely expensive, and in part, the countries are able to afford that because they don't have a defense program at all, which is kind of ironic given that those same countries are begging us to defend them from Russia right now. Additionally, those healthcare programs do in fact suck, according to people on the left and the right on the ground in those countries, specifically Canada and the United Kingdom. So, that would be a couple of great reasons as to why. Up next here, this would be from, again, from Ferner 27. I felt bad to kind of answer the earlier question. We'll hit this one on the back end. Why is this current Congress so lazy, and why do they block the Trump agenda so much? So, first of all, they're not actually doing a ton to block the Trump agenda. There are a lot of things the Trump administration has put into practice, I can't say law, but into effect via executive order. So essentially through regulations and rules. These things have to be codified with a 60-person vote in the Senate, at least. Well, there isn't a 60-vote Republican majority in the Senate. So a lot of things that Congress might put forward in a bill would not even make it through. It would end up being kind of more trouble than it's worth. This is why the midterm election matters. And it's why that Americans who really only put a lot of stock into the presidential election and not much else, that's why it's such a crucial mistake. Because if you don't put a lot of effort into the election and you don't have Congress with the majorities that you need, Congress was not designed to pass laws quickly. That's not how the founding fathers wanted it to be. If you do not actually have an effective almost a super majority, but a 60-person cloture majority in the Senate, then you aren't going to be able to get a lot of those things through. Number two, the other core reason why a lot of this Congress hasn't been actually passing an effective agenda has to do with cameras in the committee rooms. So right now, we have a policy of streaming committee meetings all the time on C-SPAN 1, 2, and 3. Not to mention CNN, Fox News, the Washington Post, and the New York Times have live streams into it. All of these different committee meetings are on broadcast. So you end up having people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez openly admitting that it's all theater and she's just going to do a little song and dance for the camera instead of actually getting things through, which is what Congress is supposed to do. So in essence, you have a lot of congressmen and women who do my job, meaning they're pundits, they're commentarians, they're analysts. They're broadcasters who get up in front of the media and do a song and dance instead of doing what you voted them in for. That's a big problem. So that's probably why I would suggest those that the lazy attribute applies most. Also, Congress has gotten really used to just passing everything off to the federal agencies, because why pass laws if the agencies are just going to do it? You can just work on your re-election campaign. Can Americans this is according to Connie, can they sue judges and possibly even the Supreme Court for jeopardizing our lives, blocking the deportation of illegal immigrants? No. Number one, because that's not actually how those certain things are adjudicated. If you want to get rid of justices, whether at the federal district level, at the appellate level, or the Supreme Court level, you gotta vote in a Congress willing to do it. The Congress of the United States is the check against corrupt judges or judges that are doing things improperly. So if you want different judges, or God forbid to impeach a judge, and I'm not saying God forbid because we don't want judges impeached if they're doing a bad job. But when I say judges impeached, I mean, God forbid, I don't want judges to do impeachable offenses. If that's to be a thing, then you need congressmen and women who are actually willing to do that. Instead, right now, what we have is a large portion of Congress that's just in the letter writing phase, which, by the way, this is why you don't see Mike Johnson in the House Oversight Committee dragging in justices and booting them right away. Not really possible when you don't have a majority that's willing to do that. You're going to have a lot of blue state Republicans and a lot of kind of mealy-mouthed moderates that aren't willing to do things. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. So we're going to kick over to the commercial break in just for the radio crew, and the live stream will continue. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, this next question here that I really like is over from the guy named Scrap Iron. Oh, I thought it was like Scorpion for a second. He spelled it really wrong. From Scrap Iron, why do I feel like we're losing? Well, it depends on who you think that, depends on what party you think you are. There's a reason that a lot of different Americans do in fact feel like they're losing at the moment. So if you are a moderate Republican, the reason that you likely feel like you're losing is because you really don't like the mean orange man and his tweets, and you never quite got over that. And so the reason you feel like you're losing is because you don't have essentially the government operating status quo antebellum ad nauseum. Moderate Republicans really like things to stay the way they are forever. And they're very rarely willing to fight for something. They just kind of, wherever the culture is and the society is right now, is what they're willing to defend, which means ignore things until they vote yes or no. And so they don't like it because everything is in fact in upheaval right now. So moderate Republicans in this country appear to come from a demographic that experienced most of their life in the victory of the Cold War, which means they were adults right around the 80s and the 90s. So they lived off the fats of World War II. And then they essentially had phenomenal jobs in an economy that they just kind of left to the government. And they just focused on living their lives and basically taking it easy, and they stopped being active citizens. So a lot of moderate Republicans who like Republican economic policy but actually don't care about anything else, now they're really upset because it isn't that way anymore. Well, that's a real shame, but that's not how the world works. You have to be an active citizen. It has to be actively protected, defended, and tended to. Why are populists right now feeling like they're losing? Well, because populists govern often on emotion. They want whoever it is to come in and knock everything over that they don't like, and to put it the way that they essentially picture is from the time in their life where they were the happiest. This is what Republican populists are really struggling with right now, is that they're like, well, why can't Trump just come in and like kick justices out? Because that's not a thing. Even though you may really want that to be a thing, that's not how that works. The left-leaning populists are really mad right now because they're losing a lot of social issues that Americans aren't supporting. And they're like, well, but we really want that to be a thing. Okay, so. And then why are the corporate left right now, do they feel like they're losing? Well, right now the kind of corporatist left feels like they're losing because they raised up this generation of backstabbers just like they were backstabbers. And now they're shocked that the David Hoggs and the AOCs and the Jasmine Crockett's are turning around and stabbing all of the old people in the back as they are wont to do. So there are a lot of people right now that kind of feel like they're losing. Funnily enough, this is kind of a summer sensation in politics, those that do stew in the bathwater of the political discourse in the country. It's easy to feel like you're losing. Realistically, right now, things are trending in a decent direction. There aren't that many status quo things being tossed aside or torn apart. And turning off the TV, and yes, even that includes the show, and going outside when it's not thunderstorming and touching some grass really does wonders. Because the people that instead organize their little angry, screaming protests and their firebombing Teslas and other kinds of goofiness, they aren't really doing anything. It turns out the number of people who regret their vote for Trump are like nigh non-existent. And the number of people who regret their vote for Harris are nigh non-existent. And that right now you have a culture that is in fact getting more involved with politics, but is not yet at the point where, you can say that everyone's either really involved or disconnected. So we're going to be back in just a second and talk a little bit with Spencer Klavan. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal. Be back in just a sec.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. I'm sure you've all seen the beautiful new slate of artwork. After all, we had the Met Gala, we had Piano Man. In New York, there now stands an amazing statue to someone, just a Black woman generic statue that I'm not convinced wasn't drop shipped from Temu, and all other kinds of nonsensical art. So when we talk about the place art needs to be, we'll go to the associate editor of Claremont Institute and the editor at large over at the American Mind, Spencer Klavan. Thanks for joining us, man.
Tony, great to be here as always. Good to see you.
So the last time that you were on, several weeks ago, I remember saying that we needed to go back to the era of bronze statues in this country, where we did start to build statues again, just in small towns everywhere, not celebrating
like
things.
Not like this. Yeah.
Not like this at all. What happened?
Boy. Well, this gets awkward really quickly. And I think the people that do this sort of thing intend for it to get awkward because that makes it easier to sort of shut down rational discussion. In normal life, everyday life, we don't hold people's looks against them. For example, even though I'm ridiculously good looking, you don't hate me, and you've managed to see through to the under. You've also seen that I'm brilliant and intelligent and articulate, which I do appreciate. But in real life, if we met the person depicted in this sculpture, we would do our best to treat her or anybody as an individual. In art, everything stands in for something more than it is. Nothing is just itself. That's why we make art. It embodies certain ideas, communicates certain things to the heart that nothing else can quite communicate. And one of the things that public statuary communicates is honor. It elevates the sorts of things that are supposed to inspire us and draw us upward. And
literally elevates it because that statue is almost always on a pedestal with a plaque below it.
That's right. One of the articles I read about it said she is peering down upon two white men. The two white men in question are Francis Duffy, the most decorated cleric ever to serve in the U.S. Army, and George M. Cohan, author of such classics as Give My Regard to Broadway, literally the man that embodies the spirit of Broadway where this statue is positioned. And so there's an idea being communicated here, right? And the idea is that mundanity, mediocrity, anonymity ought to be as celebrated as actual merit and achievement. And purposefully, the sculpture is not of a particular person. It doesn't have a name. All of the press around it is, isn't it wonderful that this ordinary person can be in the same ranks as all these titans and heroes? And the obvious answer to that is no, it's not. That's actually anti-statuary. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite of what public art is supposed to do. One of the ancient rules about this stuff is that you will get more of what you honor. We see this everywhere, all the time. It's the mimetic principle. What you put up on stage, what you celebrate, what you give awards to, people are going to try to be that thing, whether you're giving an award for best coder and millions of dollars in grants go along with that, or an award for best shoplifter and millions of dollars of grants go along with that. So if what you're saying is we oughtn't to be elevating military clerics for their courage, we oughtn't to be celebrating the best that has been achieved in this particular art form, we should just be celebrating kind of random, undistinguished people with no known accomplishments to their name, you're going to get a lot fewer courageous, pious men and a lot more random mediocrities, which is basically what this seems designed to do.
So, oh man, I hate whenever we sit down to talk, I think, oh, this is going to be an easy, 10 to 14 minute interview. No problem. I sit down and I remember this is why when I met you at that Annapolis Classical Learning Conference, and you were given an award for not being mediocre, but actually doing cool stuff. Yeah, your dad was there, Jeremy Wayne Tate, a couple of years ago. It was back when I was still suffering under the shackles.
It was actually for being ridiculously good looking, as you.
Oh, see, I knew that's why I wasn't nominated. So
better luck next year, buddy.
I remembered when we met, I thought, oh, this is a guy I'm not going to be able to have a 10 to 12 minute conversation with, because my ADHD rattled brain came up with about 15 things while you were talking, but I can't interject them because what you're saying has, again, a lot of content and value to it. One of the things I think that answered my own question as you were explaining this is that we were always going to end up here because society in the last couple of decades, since the fall of the Cold War, since that end, has valued mediocrity, has said, you know what, it's easier to value someone for just being themselves rather than to encourage individuals to go through the very difficult but necessary journey of aspiring towards greatness in some area. And Pixar, of all places, stumbled upon this in The Incredibles. Because at the beginning,
a rich text, that movie.
Right. Yeah, rich text, The Incredibles. At the beginning of the movie, Helen is giving Bob a rough time because he doesn't want to go to his son Jack's 4th grade to the 5th grade graduation. He calls the celebration of mediocrity psychotic.
I can't believe you don't want to go to your own son's graduation.
It's not a graduation. He is moving from the 4th grade to the 5th grade.
It's a ceremony.
It's psychotic. They keep creating new ways to celebrate mediocrity. But
later on, the villain of the movie, Syndrome, makes a point accidentally. What I mean accidentally is in Pixar did not intend for this line to be true. It's like Archie Bunkerism, right? They intended this to be a bad thing and it ended up being a very good thing. Syndrome says, quote, when everyone is super, meaning I've given all of these weapons so that everyone can be a superhero. When everyone is super, no one will be.
I'll sell my invention so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
And now, in society, we've celebrated mediocrity for 20, 25, 30 years. Now we're building statues to no one, to the mediocre, because nothing is super anymore.
And it's funny because this, again, when you start to say this, you're instantly accused of, oh, you hate this particular race. You hate her because she's ugly, whatever.
I don't think we've mentioned the fact that it's a lady or that she's black or the weight of the statue once.
Said that, right, because it's actually not relevant.
About that at all.
People are angry about. And it's also no knock on ordinary people. I mean, it is true that ordinary people can be quite extraordinary and quite laudable, and that there are all sorts of things like motherhood, for example, that don't get celebrated,
right,
because they're so commonplace and
But
ordinary.
that's also the extraordinary thing, though, right? I mean, it's not the fact that the person is normal that is worth celebrating, but it is the little facets we often overlook that are worth celebrating.
Totally. And that line from Syndrome, I mean, I don't know. I love The Incredibles. And I think it's the fact that he is the villain that makes that line so great, that he's basically, his evil plan is to level the playing field by giving everybody a participation trophy. the artist of this sculpture, Thomas Price, I think is his name. I'm going to say something perhaps a little bit transgressive for this audience in this venue, which is I actually think he's a talented guy. He's got a remarkable kind of gift for realism and for statuary. I'll go one further and say something perhaps a little bit controversial for the do it audience in this venue, which is the creator of this statue, Thomas Price. I looked up some of his work. I think he's a talented guy. And actually, at the very least, he's not throwing paint at a wall. He's not deconstructing form. He's making realist sculpture, and he's quite gifted at it. Some of his stuff is really detailed and lovely. But this is the point of his work, quite expressly. He's an artist of the mundane. And that's not in itself a problem. Again, it's actually, there are lots of great artists who have made art.
One can argue that Norman Rockwell, in a lot of the paintings, indeed captured the mundane American spirit, but in a way that was gorgeous and, again, pointed out small things that were often overlooked, like the artist painting himself, for example.
Right. Exactly. And there were always, I think, dynamics going on in Rockwell's paintings that you could really sort of invest in. You understood who these people were. And it's also true, though, that place, setting, and medium or genre matters, right? So every work of art is in its context. The context of this work of art is very expressly, in the middle of this public plaza where we put statues of people who are extraordinary. And so the subversiveness is not even in the art exactly. It's in the kind of anti-honor and the whole culture of mediocrity that is sort of designed to encourage.
And this is one of the weirder points of some of the artists that we see today. And I'm really going to get into the weeds and probably be wrong here, but this is just kind of what I've observed, that there's also an issue with people like Lin-Manuel Miranda over in theater and songwriting, who are trying to take major historical events and boil them down to, well, it's actually just mediocrity and normalcy that happened to fall in the right places. It's always frustrated me in a lot of his modern songwriting that he seems to take people and say, well, everyone is just normal and they happened to make the right decision or the wrong decision at the right time. And it elevates kind of the chance of fate and timing rather than the pursuit of excellence and expertise. Now, the funny thing is, the counter to this, however, is when he touched Hamilton and the miraculous manner of how he fervently, without distraction for a while, Reynolds' pamphlet notwithstanding, did pursue excellence, that is actually kind of different than a lot of his other work. A lot of his other work doesn't really hold that kind of action. And people that get down the rabbit trail of kind of modern theater and songwriting, people more wise than I am have noticed there is an elevation of the mediocre in a way that has showcased a serious rotting away of, I don't know, American excellence, perhaps.
It's so interesting. And I'm really glad. It sounds like we have almost exactly the same take on Lin-Manuel Miranda's career. And this is a key requirement of friendship, of course, is that you have the same opinions about Lin-Manuel Miranda. But I'm a Hamilton. I'm a Hamilton squish too, I will say. And some conservatives get down on it for this or that reason. I actually think it's a true achievement of American musical theater. And you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about it this way. The whole point of Hamilton's character in that show is he writes like he's running out of time. He's got this obsessive drive. He cares about ideals and principles. And he's got, obviously he speaks in the vernacular, and the whole point is the cast is sort of multiracial and so on and so forth. Versus, I think Disney basically ruined Lin-Manuel. I think that trying to fit his weird musical theater gift into whatever era of Disney we're on that just rots everything from the inside had totally destroyed him. And a lot of his later stuff gets worse and worse. But the Hamilton thing illustrates another important point, right? Which is that ordinary people, as we've said, can be extraordinary, can be virtuous, can be excellent without necessarily living the kinds of lives that might earn them a bronze statue in the middle of Times Square. Mm-hmm. But it's ordinary people who are operating within high ideals, right? Yes,
Bilbo Baggins. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. It's the hobbits, right? It's like we are all, even the best of us who do great things, we're all shabby little hobbits that get up and put our socks on them.
As of all people, Eisenhower made the point explicitly well. He said, I am a normal man who tries to achieve what has been set before me.
And that's right, because he was living in a culture that could set these high things before him and had expectations of him that he could live up to and be drawn toward. Now we have this idea that an expectation or an ideal is an insult, right? That by putting forward an ideal, we've basically told people that they suck because they don't live up to it. And the greats of the past always failed to live up to the ideals until they didn't, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole point of an archetype, the whole point of a social role, the whole point of an ideal is that you are, of course, you're just a schlub. We all know that already. That point doesn't need making with a statue in Times Square.
But again, where the statue in Times Square fails without any chance for redemption. And also how this is a great example of how the left is losing the following generation is that the lady in the statue is not aspiring to anything. She's not trying anything. She's not doing anything. She simply is. And in the Generation Z and I Alpha culture, there's an obsession with, for example, Leonardo DiCaprio's character in The Wolf of Wall Street with Patrick Bateman. Even in The Great Gatsby, another of Leo's projects, you see this young aspirational man who goes and participates in Wall Street. He wants to go out. He's bright, eyes shiny. It's the American frontier in economics. And right now there's currently the meme of the Charlie Sheen kind of riding around with the cigarette in the 90s.
Right.
There's this idea that the average guy, if he just goes out and he tries, can still achieve American excellence. And even though it's a tarnished vision, the left hasn't put forward statues of gentlemen conquering their respective fields. And that's not even celebrated. And therefore they're not appealing to the younger generation. Hollywood thinks it's because people are racist, homophobic, whatevers.
Right.
Without understanding.
It's always your fault for not liking the movie.
That there's no excellence that's been achieved. So what do I have to aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, this is You Are Enough, the sculpture, right, is really what's going on here. And that's something that I think it's Jordan Peterson.
Wow,
who made
Tumblr finally built a statue. Good for them.
Exactly. They're all grown up now. And the people that grew up on Tumblr are like creating art that expresses exactly this sentiment, right? And I think it's Jordan Peterson who said something about, if I am enough, that's terrible news, right? Because we all know what a disaster, what a train wreck we are.
My producer's accusing me of sounding very much like Jordan Peterson in that moment.
Oh yeah.
It's like Tumblr, it means you have no control, man.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Please continue. Sorry about that.
No, totally. It is. I mean, this is a good point of his, right? That if you're enough, it's actually a terrible thing to say to somebody that you are enough.
Yeah,
and
of course.
That probably speaks to
there's nothing left for you to do.
Yes. And it probably speaks to why young people, young men especially, are not all that interested in this. For a while, it's kind of reassuring if you had all these expectations and then you get those expectations taken away. But something I've been noticing recently is that it's not the generation who's offered the big, shiny lollipop that the left wants to give them. It's not that generation that wakes up. It's the generation that has to live with the hangover and never actually experiences the lollipop, right? This is true of the sexual revolution as well, that at the time, there was this enormous release of erotic energy. And that generation, the boomers, basically lived their whole lives riding that high. And now Gen Alpha is sort of writing these books about actually, I don't know, this may be a Gen Z author, but, rethinking sex, right? And you read these op-eds about what basically amounts to the bombed out ruins of a culture through which there wander these emaciated ghosts. And these are kids who have been deprived of, they didn't even get the party. They just got the next day hangover. And I think the same is true of like honor. This whole thing about like being cringe is cool now. You know, we're gonna try. Like the Timothée Chalamet made that amazing speech after he won the Oscar.
Right.
I know I'm not supposed to want this, but I do. I want to be excellent. I want to be one of the greats. Like that whole.
You have the youths that are dressing up to go out on very, very simple dates, and they're longing for art and culture local to them. And it's funny that you mentioned this. I never had thought of describing it as this generation that was offered. And by the way, this is not a slam on the entirety of the boomers or X at all. No, most likely those who are tuning in, who are listening, did not participate in this. That's why they're
boomer is a state of mind. Every generation is actually just a state of mind, not age. Right.
But that said, there is an interesting little segue here. So before my wife and I got together, before my wife and I were married, actually, I was introducing her to some family. And there was one lady who asked me, kind of an older lady, she was shocked that my wife and I weren't living together before we were married. And she basically intimated the question, like, why I wouldn't want to see what it was like to live with my wife before we were married. And I was shocked that an older person would be asking that question, but no, the age ranges for like the sexual revolution did in fact line up. And now that the younger millennials and Gen Z are living with the hangover, a lot of that just go for it lifestyle is just unpalatable. We don't like seeing the hangover. No, thank you.
Yeah. People express concern, like beyond a certain people of the type that we are describing, like the woman who was shocked that you weren't living with your girlfriend before marriage. It's not just surprise. Oh, that's unusual. It's like, are you okay? I think you're being too hard.
It's like a wellness check.
Exactly. This is true. So I saw somebody recently posting about this, that when you get super in shape, like if you work really hard at the gym, people get worried about you. It's like, oh, are you developing an eating disorder? You know, you look too thin, like have some more to eat. Nobody says that to obese people. Like nobody says, gosh, you look like a tub of lard. Are you okay? Right?
Gosh, they're building a statue of you in New York. Are you all right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. And so like there is a degree of that whole attitude has become incredibly uncool. I mean, you and I even, I'm sorry to break it to you, are rapidly passing out of the age range where we're cool. We're quickly becoming cringe.
I'm finding out that as I'm removed from not just a generation, but I'm now 2 generations from some of the slang.
Yes.
It's hurting me in ways that I didn't know. To find out there are words that describe millennials, and when millennials are acting millennially, it hurts me. But
I never thought that this petard would hoist me. I never realized when I was making fun of the boomers that I too would one day be the old person.
Would be called chuggy and other terms of like, all right, last thing here, because I know we've gone well over here. There's one thing I wanted to ask, the kind of the concept of art and engaging with things. I have been meaning to play this clip on the show for ages. I never have. But then I saw your article this morning on AI and kind of AI chatbots. Mark Zuckerberg made this announcement a couple of weeks ago about how Facebook might be populating a lot of its site with AI bots for people to chat with and communicate with.
I think as the personalization loop kicks in and the AI just starts to get to know you better and better, I think that will just be really compelling. You know, one thing just from working on social media for a long time is there's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think it's fewer than 3 friends, 3 people that they'd consider friends. And the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's like 15 friends or something, right? I guess there's probably some point where you're like, all right, I'm just too busy. I can't deal with more people. But the average person wants more connectivity, connection than they have. So, you know, there's a lot of questions that people ask of stuff like, okay, is this going to replace kind of in-person connections or real life connections? And my default is that the answer to that is probably no. I think I think that there are all these things that are better about kind of physical connections when you can have them, but the reality is that people just don't have the connection and they feel more alone a lot of the time than they would like. So
I do worry about the advent of AI bots becoming so commonplace. Again, not for kind of the Microsoft Office utility of finding and looking at things and compiling data, but trying to imitate, again, this "you are enough" culture in conversation with beings that aren't even real. Can you tell us a little bit about your article?
That's fascinating. I mean, one thing about AI chatbots, which, by the way, like Hamilton, I love AI chatbots. Like, this is another thing that everyone's currently fulminating about that I actually really enjoy. Grok is totally my new Google. It's replaced Google as a verb in my vocabulary. So this is not actually assault on the technology itself.
No, it has become my filing cabinet. I have all of these articles that I've written, and it can sort through things and find things I may have said ages ago, so I don't have to spend an hour looking for them. It's wonderful.
That's great. Right, exactly. But the other thing about it that you instantly notice is, by design, and this is part of how these programs work, it delivers the most mediocre possible response, the most anodyne language, the most obvious answer. It's very good at drawing connections. It's very good at searching things, as you say. All of that is true. But because it is effectively a souped up version of the predictive text on your phone, right? When you're typing a text message and it says, is the next word this? It has to give you the most likely thing. Friendship, in the classical tradition, is just the opposite. It's the unlikely moment when somebody loves something that you also love, and you both love it because of the thing itself. You love ice skating this much too, right? And it's because you didn't tell that person to do that you're so excited about who this is. It's literally the opposite of a chatbot, right? Which is basically a technological clinger. It's like the kind of guy that just likes ice skating because you like it. And we all know that there's something profoundly hollow.
Oh yeah, it's the yes man personified.
Right. That's
but
the person,
not personified though.
Exactly.
It's the yes man regurgitated.
Yes. I mean, when that person is a human and we meet him in real life, he's kind of a tragic figure, right? Because he craves connection, but for that very reason, he can't achieve it. Like, he's always trying to make friends by just liking what you like. And that is instantly repulsive. It's an instant turnoff. That is the only thing that an AI can do. And luckily it's not alive, so we don't have to feel bad for it. The problem is,
yes.
The problem is people really are lonely. Zuck is right about that.
Yes.
And this is something that I think, it pays at this moment to sort of reorient ourselves and ask, like, what even is friendship? What are we looking for? Because I can't think of a person less qualified to answer that question than Mark Zuckerberg, nor of an intervention more likely to make things worse than this one.
You're not going to go to the lizard man for relationship advice? I, for one, am shocked.
Alas, I'm sorry to break it to you, but just something about the guy gives me the creeps.
I could offer this bit of encouragement, though, that I don't believe, while I see a lot of dooming going on, to use the younger word, a lot of doom and gloom being preached about how AI, this is the Black Mirror brushing up against the darkness of that future dystopia where everyone's going to only be talking to AIs and it's going to be very sad, dull, drear, and gray. I will offer that AI cannot ever actually be alive. And the reason I would argue that I don't think it will ever leave the uncanny valley in these chatbots and be an effective replacement is that only mankind is created in the image of God. And therefore, only mankind can actually engender the non-Pavlovian, as we see with animals, or the non-regurgitative predictive analysis of AI. Only we desire creation and kinship and strife in a small way, that the disagreement that brings newer things, that's something that is only found in one that contains the image of the creator. And so we can't create that in and of itself. Only I think he has that ability to do so. And I think that's encouraging.
That's a very beautiful and eloquent speech. I'll just add that it's not even the kind of thing that can be alive. It's not doing sentience, it's imitating sentience. So my extremely amusing or my extremely lowbrow final response to your beautiful encomium is that I saw a tweet where somebody said.
You can't suggest that was beautiful and then like follow that up with the word encomium and expect this not
I actually don't think
fantastic.
encomium was quite the right word, if it makes you feel better. So,
Please, by all photosynthesis, continue.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, cromulently, I just wanted to reference a tweet that somebody's put out there, which was, I wrote "I'm alive" onto a piece of paper and put it into a photocopier. The results are alarming. That's basically what we're up to here, I think.
Oh man, I tell you what, every time we sit down to chat, again, it always ends up going a little bit longer. It's great. Again, head over to AmericanMind.org. Check out some of Spencer's writings. Of course, his Substack as well. His Twitter is excellent. We'll have all that stuff in the description. Thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us about this.
Tony, thanks, man. It's always a joy.
Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday for a whole lot more. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.